Steve Harvey has seen lies on his stage before. Small ones, nervous ones. The kind that slip out when a contestant is trying to impress the cameras or save face in front of their family. But on a February evening in 2026, Steve Harvey watched something different. He watched a man's entire system of lies collapse in real time, piece by piece, answer by answer, until there was nothing left standing but the truth and the wreckage. And what made Steve intervene faster than he had ever intervened before was not the lies themselves. It was the fact that the man's own family, one by one, stopped covering for him. His brother stopped. His best friend stopped. And finally, his own teenage daughter stopped. And when that 15-year-old girl looked at her father on national television and said the words that ended his performance forever, Steve Harvey moved to the center of that stage faster than the cameras could follow, because he knew that what was happening had crossed the line from a game show moment into something that required an adult to take control before a child got hurt any further. There was a time when a family's loyalty was assumed. There was a time when standing beside someone on a stage meant standing behind their story, no matter what. But when the people who loved Darren Blake the most could no longer stomach the lies he was asking them to maintain, they did the hardest thing a family can do. They chose the truth over the man who was lying to them. And the way those lies collapsed, like dominoes falling from the edges inward until the last one standing was his own daughter, became one of the most watched and most emotionally devastating moments in Family Feud history. If you believe that family loyalty should never require you to protect a lie, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. The way this man's deception falls apart on live television is unlike anything you have ever seen, and Steve Harvey's response is one of the fastest and most powerful interventions of his entire career. Jasmine Blake was 44 years old. She was from Columbia, South Carolina, the daughter of a retired high school principal named Dr. Harriet Sims and a deacon named George Sims who had worked for the city water department for 35 years. The Sims family was known in their community for two things: education and integrity. Harriet ran her high school with a gentle authority that made students want to do better, not because they feared her but because disappointing her felt worse than any punishment. George ran the household with the same steady reliability he brought to the water department. The lights were always on, the yard was always cut, the bills were always paid, and every Sunday, the family sat in the same pew at the same church and thanked God for a life that was built on doing things the right way. Harriet had a phrase she used with her students and her own children with equal frequency. She would say, "The truth does not need a support team. Only lies need people to hold them up." Jasmine heard that sentence throughout her childhood, in the hallways of her mother's school, at the dinner table, and in the car on the way to church. She understood it intellectually from a young age. She would understand it viscerally, painfully, and permanently on a game show stage decades later. Jasmine earned a degree in social work from the University of South Carolina and spent her career working with families in the foster care system. She matched children with safe homes, navigated complex legal proceedings, and spent long days in courtrooms and living rooms trying to put broken situations back together. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work that paid modestly and demanded everything she had. But Jasmine was her mother's daughter. She showed up every day. She did the work the right way, and she went home every evening believing that the stability she maintained in her professional life was mirrored in her personal one. She met Darren Blake at a community fundraiser when she was 27. Darren was 29, a regional sales representative for a commercial cleaning supply company. He covered accounts across the Carolinas and into Georgia, which meant regular travel and a schedule that shifted from week to week. He was outgoing, persuasive, and had the kind of smile that made people trust him before he had said a single word. He told Jasmine on their first date that he admired women who did meaningful work and that her career in foster care made her one of the most important people he had ever met. Jasmine, who spent her days being overlooked and underpaid, was deeply moved by the recognition. They married after 2 years. The ceremony was at George and Harriet's church. Dr. Harriet sat in the front row and watched her daughter walk down the aisle with the focused, evaluating expression of a woman who had assessed thousands of young people and was now assessing the man about to join her family. George shook Darren's hand at the altar and said, "My daughter chose you. Honor that choice every day." Darren nodded and said, "I will, sir." For the first 11 years, the marriage appeared to function. They settled in a house outside of Columbia. They had 2 children. Their daughter, Imani, was now 15, sharp and perceptive, with her grandmother Harriet's gift for reading people and her mother's quiet intensity. Their son, Xavier, was 12, athletic and social, the kid who knew everyone at school and was friends with all of them. Jasmine continued her work in foster care. Darren's sales career grew and his territory expanded, meaning more travel, more nights on the road, and more stretches of time when Jasmine managed the household alone. The lies had been accumulating for years, though Jasmine did not have a clear picture of them until 5 months before the Family Feud taping. It started when Jasmine received a call from the mother of one of Xavier's basketball teammates. The woman, making casual conversation at a weekend game, mentioned that she had seen Darren at a restaurant in Charlotte with a woman. She said it lightly, almost as a joke, assuming it was a work colleague, but the name of the restaurant did not match any work dinner Darren had mentioned. Jasmine thanked her, hung up, and felt the first fissure open in the ground beneath her. Over the next 5 months, Jasmine paid closer attention. She noticed that Darren's brother Keith, who sometimes traveled with Darren for company events, had started avoiding eye contact with her at family dinners. She noticed that Darren's best friend, Michael, who had been a fixture at their house for years, had stopped coming around as often. She noticed that Imani, her 15-year-old daughter, had become quiet around her father, no longer asking him about his trips or running to the door when he came home. Something was shifting in the ecosystem of her family, and the people closest to Darren were behaving like people who knew a secret. Jasmine did not confront Darren. Instead, she applied a skill she had developed over 20 years of social work. She observed, she documented, she connected patterns, and she arrived at a conclusion that was not definitive in the evidentiary sense, but was overwhelming in its weight. Darren was having an affair, and multiple people in her life, including his brother, his best friend, and possibly their own daughter, knew about it and were choosing silence. The Family Feud appearance was Darren's idea. He applied and was thrilled when the family was accepted. The team was Darren, Jasmine, Keith, Michael, and Imani, who Darren had insisted on including because, he said, she was old enough and it would be a great memory. Jasmine agreed to go. She agreed to everything. She packed her bag, smiled at the airport, and sat on the plane beside her husband with the patient, watchful composure of a woman who had decided that the Family Feud stage was where the truth would finally be tested. Not by her. By the people who had been carrying Darren's lies. She wanted to see how long they could hold them up under the lights. The Blake team was matched against the Morales family from Denver, Colorado, a warm and competitive family of 5 whose matriarch was a retired police officer who treated every question like a witness interrogation. Steve Harvey loved the energy from both families and worked the introductions with his usual warmth. Darren introduced Jasmine smoothly. "Steve, this is my beautiful wife, Jasmine. 17 years of marriage. She saves children for a living. There is no better person on this planet." He looked at the audience with practiced sincerity. Jasmine smiled beside him. Keith and Michael stood further back in the lineup, looking everywhere except at Jasmine. Imani stood at the end, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The first round went normally. The Blake team won the face-off. Darren answered confidently. Jasmine gave a solid answer. The game felt routine. The second round began. Steve read the question. "We asked 100 people, name something a wife finds that proves her husband is lying." The Blake team was playing the board. Answers came in from around the lineup: a phone, a receipt, lipstick on a collar. The standard answers. The board had 2 spots remaining. It was Keith's turn, Darren's brother. Keith stepped to the podium. Steve repeated the question. "Name something a wife finds that proves her husband is lying." Keith looked at the board. He looked at Steve. And then, without looking at Darren, he said, "His brother." The answer was not on the board. Strike 1. The audience laughed, thinking it was a quirky answer. Steve smirked. His brother. What do you mean, his brother? Keith did not explain. He walked back to the lineup without making eye contact with anyone, but something had shifted. The answer had carried a weight that the audience sensed, but could not yet identify. Darren laughed it off. My brother is a character. Steve. Steve moved on. The next answer came from Michael, Darren's best friend. Michael stepped up. Steve asked the question again. Michael looked at the board, then at Darren, then at Jasmine. He stood at the podium for 3 full seconds before speaking. The truth, Michael said. His voice was flat, final, not on the board strike 2. But the way Michael said it, and the way he walked back to the lineup and stood as far from Darren as the space would allow, sent a ripple through the studio. Something was happening beneath the surface of this game, and the audience was beginning to feel it. Steve's instincts were firing. His eyes moved between the family members, reading the body language that was telling a story the answers were not. Keith would not look at Darren. Michael had physically distanced himself. Jasmine was standing with her arms crossed, watching everything with the clinical attention of a social worker assessing a household. One more strike and the round would go to the Morales family for a steal. It was Amani's turn, Darren's 15-year-old daughter, the last person in the rotation. Imani walked to the podium. She was tall for 15, with her mother's posture and her grandmother Harriet's eyes. Steve softened his voice the way he always did with younger contestants. All right, sweetheart. We need one more answer. Name something a wife finds that proves her husband is lying. Imani stood at the podium. She looked at the board. She looked at Steve Harvey, and then she turned and looked directly at her father. The look lasted 3 seconds. It was not the look of a child. It was the look of a teenager who had been carrying something too heavy for far too long and had reached the exact moment when she could not carry it one more step. His daughter, Imani said. His daughter finds out because she hears him on the phone. She sees him texting. She notices when he lies about where he has been, and she does not say anything because she does not want to break her mother's heart. But she knows. She has known for months, and she is tired of pretending she does not. The studio did not erupt. It imploded. The silence came first, a vast, crushing silence that lasted 2 full seconds. Then the gasps. Then the murmurs. Then a woman in the 4th row saying, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphones to catch. Then a wave of emotion that moved through 200 people simultaneously as they realized what they had just heard. A 15-year-old girl had just told her father, on national television, that she knew about his affair and that carrying his secret had been destroying her. Darren's face underwent a transformation that the cameras captured in devastating detail. The salesman's smile disappeared. The charm evaporated. What was left was the raw, unmasked face of a man whose daughter had just looked him in the eyes and told the world that she knew who he really was. Jasmine turned to look at Imani, and what crossed Jasmine's face was not shock. It was the heartbroken recognition of a mother realizing that her child had been suffering in silence to protect her. The tears came immediately, not for Darren's betrayal, but for Imani's burden. Steve Harvey moved. He moved fast. He crossed the stage in 4 steps, set his card on the podium without looking at it, and positioned himself directly in front of Imani. Not Darren, not Jasmine, Imani. Because Steve Harvey, the father of 7 children, understood instantly that the most vulnerable person on that stage was not the betrayed wife. It was the 15-year-old girl who had just set down a weight that no child should ever have to carry. "Stop the game," Steve said. "Right now. This is done." The Steve spoke to Imani first. He lowered himself slightly to be closer to her eye level, and his voice dropped to a register that was gentle but unshakable. "Imani, I need you to hear me. What you just did was not your job. Carrying that secret was not your responsibility. It should never have been on your shoulders. You are 15 years old. You should be worrying about school and your friends, and whatever 15-year-olds worry about these days. You should not be lying awake at night trying to protect your mother from something your father did. That was his burden to carry, not yours. And I need you to know right now, in front of all these people, that you did nothing wrong. The adults in your life failed to protect you from this. And I am sorry that happened." Imani's composure broke. She pressed her hands to her face and cried, and the sound of a 15 17-year-old girl, finally releasing months of silence, hit the studio like a physical force. Jasmine crossed the stage in 2 steps and wrapped her arms around her daughter. She held Amani's head against her shoulder and whispered something that the microphones did not catch, but that every parent in the audience understood. Amani cried harder, and Jasmine held her tighter. Then Steve turned to the lineup where Darren, Keith, and Michael stood. His expression shifted from tenderness to something far harder. I want to talk about what just happened here, because it is not just about one man's affair, it is about a system of lies that required other people to function. Darren, you did not lie alone. You recruited your brother. You recruited your best friend. And whether you knew it or not, you recruited your own daughter. 3 people in this lineup knew your secret. Your brother gave a cryptic answer because the weight of carrying your lie was breaking him. Your best friend said the truth because he could not bring himself to play the game anymore. And your daughter, your 15-year-old child, stood at my podium and told the world that she has been watching you lie to her mother for months and staying silent to protect her. Steve pointed at Keith and Michael. You too, you are grown men. You had a choice. You could have told Jasmine the truth. You could have told Darren to come clean. Instead, you held his lie up for him. My mother-in-law, Jasmine's mother, once said that only lies need people to hold them up. The truth stands on its own, and tonight on my stage the people who were holding up Darren's lies finally let go. Keith let go first. Michael let go second. And Amani, a child, let go last. Because she was the most loyal. She held on the longest. And that is the most heartbreaking part of this entire thing. The person who suffered the most to protect your secret, Darren, was your own daughter. The audience response was immediate and overwhelming. People were on their feet. Many were crying openly. The Morales family across the stage stood in solidarity, the retired police officer grandmother pressing her hand to her heart. Steve turned to Darren directly. Darren, I have 7 children. I know what it is like to look at your child and know that they look up to you. I know what that responsibility feels like. And I am telling you right now, man to man, father to father, what you did to Amani is worse than what you did to Jasmine. Your wife is an adult. She will grieve, she will process, and she will rebuild. That is what strong women do. But your daughter is 15. She carried your secret because she loved you too much to expose you and loved her mother too much to let her find out. You put that child in an impossible position. You made her choose between her parents. No child should ever have to make that choice. And you forced it on her because you were too much of a coward to tell the truth yourself. Darren was standing alone. Keith had moved to the far edge of the lineup. Michael had stepped off the stage entirely and was standing near the curtain. The physical isolation mirrored the emotional reality. The support team had disbanded. The lies had no one left to hold them up. Darren spoke. His voice was wrecked. I know what I did. I know what I put all of them through. I told myself that keeping quiet was protecting my family. I told Keith and Michael the same thing. I told myself Amani did not know. But she did know. She always knew. And she was braver than all of us. She was braver than me, braver than Keith, braver than Michael. A 15-year-old girl had more courage in one sentence than 3 grown men had in 2 years. I am ashamed. And I should be. Jasmine, still holding Amani, looked at Darren over their daughter's shoulder. Her voice was steady and devastating. You told me you were a man who does not lie. You said that on our first date. You said that at our wedding. You said that every time I asked you a question and you gave me an answer that was not true. But here is what you forgot, Darren. I work in foster care. I spend my life looking at families and figuring out what is broken and why. I read body language. I read silences. I read the space between what people say and what people do. I have been reading your family for months. Your brother could not look at me. Your best friend stopped coming to dinner. And my daughter, my baby, stopped running to the door when you came home. I read all of it. I just needed to hear it out loud. And tonight, your entire support system said it for me. They could not carry your lies anymore, and neither can I. The standing ovation lasted over a minute. Steve Harvey stood at center stage, his hand pressed to his chest, and addressed the camera. What you just witnessed was not one person telling the truth. It was an entire system of lies falling apart. The brother cracked first, the friend cracked second, and the daughter, a 15-year-old girl who should have been enjoying her childhood, cracked last because she was the strongest and the most loyal. She held on the longest. And that should haunt every person who knew this secret and let a child carry it. Dr. Harriet Sims, Jasmine's mother, said it best. The truth does not need a support team. Only lies need people to hold them up. Tonight on my stage the support team collapsed, and the truth was the only thing left standing. ACT Fati Lai CY 1620 Valerie Playoff. The game was never completed. Both families received full prizes and compensation. The Morales family matriarch, the retired police officer, approached Jasmine backstage and said, "In 30 years of law enforcement, I learned that cases are not solved by investigators. They are solved by witnesses who finally decide to talk. Your family decided to talk tonight. Every single one of them. And that took more courage than anything I ever saw on the job." When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of the most discussed television moments of the year. The clip was viewed over 120 million times, but what made this episode different from every other Family Feud revelation was the structure. It was not a single explosive moment. It was a cascade. Keith's cryptic answer, Michael's flat, the truth, and finally Amani's devastating confession. Viewers described it as watching a building collapse floor by floor. Each person who stopped covering for Darren removed a load-bearing wall until the entire structure of deception came down. Media analysts called it the most dramatic real-time disintegration of a lie ever captured on television. The conversation that dominated the public response was not about Darren's affair. It was about the children, specifically about Amani. Child psychologists appeared on talk shows and podcasts to discuss the phenomenon of children who discover a parent's infidelity and carry the knowledge in silence. They called it the silent witness burden, and explained that children in Amani's position often experience anxiety, depression, and a profound sense of misplaced responsibility. Several therapists credited the episode with bringing long overdue attention to a problem that was far more common than most adults realized. One psychologist wrote, "Amani Blake stood at a game show podium and put words to something that thousands of teenagers experience in silence. She gave them language. She gave them permission. And she showed them that the secret is not theirs to keep." Jasmine returned to Colombia and went back to work. She filed for divorce within a month. The proceedings were handled with the efficiency of a woman who had spent 2 decades navigating legal systems for other families and knew exactly how to navigate one for her own. She maintained Darren's visitation rights with both children because she believed that her children's relationship with their father was not hers to sever, only his to repair. Dr. Harriet Sims watched the episode from her living room with George beside her. She called Jasmine that evening and said, with the measured clarity of a woman who had spent 40 years shaping young minds, "Your daughter quoted my lesson tonight without ever hearing it from me. I said the truth does not need a support team." Amani proved it. She stood alone at that podium and told the truth when 3 grown men could not. "She is my granddaughter, and she made me prouder than any student I ever graduated." Jasmine said hearing her mother's voice was the moment she knew her family would be okay, not unbroken, but okay. Keith gave one interview. He said, "I knew for over a year. Darren told me and asked me to keep quiet. I did. And every time I sat at Jasmine's dinner table and ate her food and looked at her and Amani, I felt like I was dying inside. When Steve asked me that question on stage, I could not do it anymore. I said his brother, because that was the truth. I was the thing that proved Darren was lying. Because I knew, and I said nothing. And that makes me part of it. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." Michael did not give interviews but posted a brief statement online. He wrote, "I said the truth, because I had no more lies left in me. When I stood at that podium and Steve Harvey asked me for an answer, the only word I could think of was the one I had been running from. The truth. It was the only honest thing I said that entire day. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it to Jasmine directly months ago. I failed her, and I failed Amani." Amani did not speak publicly. Jasmine protected her daughter's privacy fiercely and declined all interview requests on Amani's behalf. But Jasmine told a reporter that Imani had started seeing a therapist and was processing the experience in a healthy way. She said Imani had told her, a few weeks after the taping, "Mom, I am sorry I did not tell you sooner." Jasmine held her daughter and said, "Baby, that was never your job. You were brave. You were so brave, and now we are both free." Steve Harvey spoke about the Blake episode at numerous events. At a parenting conference, he delivered a speech that was viewed millions of times online. "I have been asked what the fastest I have ever moved on my stage was. People expect me to name a funny moment or a physical comedy bit. But the fastest I ever moved was the night a 15-year-old girl named Imani stood at my podium and told the world she had been carrying her father's secret. I crossed that stage in 4 steps because I could see in her eyes that she was about to break, and I needed to be standing in front of her when she did. Not to stop her, to catch her. Because that is what adults are supposed to do. We are supposed to catch children when the weight of the adult world lands on them. And that night, the adult world had landed on Imani Blake with a force that no 15-year-old should ever have to absorb." He continued, "But I want to say something else. Imani was not the only one who told the truth that night. Keith told the truth in his own coded way. Michael told the truth when he could not pretend anymore. Each of them broke one by one because the lie was too heavy, and that is the lesson I want every family to take away from this. If your lie requires other people to maintain it, it is only a matter of time before one of them cracks. And when one cracks, they all crack, because lies are not load-bearing structures. They collapse under the weight of the people who are tired of holding them up." 1 year later, Family Feud invited Jasmine back for a special update. She walked onto the stage to a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. She wore a deep emerald dress and a simple pendant that Imani had given her for Mother's Day, a small silver circle engraved with the word, "Truth." Beside Jasmine, in the front row, sat Dr. Harriet Sims, now 72, her back as straight as ever, and Imani, now 16, sitting next to her grandmother with a composure that belied her age. Steve hugged Jasmine and asked how she was doing. Jasmine smiled, a full, settled, earned smile. "Steve, I am doing what I have done my whole career. I am putting families back together. Except now one of those families is mine. My daughter is healing. She is in therapy. She is writing about her experience for a school project on honesty, and her teacher said it is the most powerful thing a student has ever turned in. My mother comes to dinner every Sunday and quotes herself and pretends she does not know she is doing it. And I wake up every morning in a house where nobody is lying, where nobody is carrying a secret that does not belong to them, where every conversation is real, and real. Steve, after years of living inside someone else's performance, real is the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced." Steve looked at the front row where Imani was sitting. "Imani, can I say something to you?" The teenager nodded. Steve addressed her directly, his voice thick with emotion. "A year ago, you stood at my podium and you told the truth when 3 grown men could not. You were 15 years old. You were braver than your father, braver than your uncle, and braver than your father's best friend. And I need you to know that what you did that night did not just free your mother. It freed you. You are not carrying that secret anymore. It is gone. And wherever you go from here, you go lighter, you go honest, and you go knowing that a whole country saw your courage and was changed by it." Imani did not speak. She simply nodded. But Dr. Harriet, sitting beside her, reached over and took her granddaughter's hand, and the camera caught a moment that needed no words. A 72-year-old retired principal and a 16-year-old girl, grandmother and granddaughter, connected by blood and by the belief that had defined their family for generations. The truth does not need a support team. Only lies need people to hold them up. On that February evening, the support team had collapsed, and the truth, held by a 15-year-old girl who was braver than every adult around her, was the only thing left standing. It was still standing a year later. It would stand forever. If this story reminded you that children should never carry the weight of adult lies, that the truth will always outlast the people trying to suppress it, and that sometimes the bravest person in the room is the youngest one, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. We bring you the most incredible and emotional Family Feud moments every single week. Real families, real courage, and real truth. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.